Let's talk about cancer research next. We're joined by Victor Oginga Oria. Victor is the lead research fellow at Biotech Research and Innovation Center in Copenhagen, and is also a chief scientist at Integrated Cancer Research Foundation of Kenya. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Eric.
Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Thank you.
It's a hot seat of the Situation Room. How does it feel?
I'm actually anxious and a bit nervous because I've never been in a studio before. Yeah, and I worship you guys because you have very tough questions every morning, and so me being here and going through this, I think it's. I don't know if I'm well prepared, but I hope we'll have a good conversation.
You've used the word worship. Wewe mwenyewe. Wekelea tithe. Tithe mara moja.
It's worship in a good way. Yes, it's worship in a good way.
Don't worry.
Yes.
It's warmer than Copenhagen, I'm sure.
Definitely. See, I had to cut my
hair. What are the temperatures now?
Yes.
You had to cut.
I had to cut my hair when I got here because it was hotter here. Yeah. I arrived on Saturday morning, and apparently there was heavy snowstorms that is going out through Europe. Airports have closed, railways, supermarkets not working. So 30-40 centimeter thick snow throughout Europe. So it's very, very cold.
You left this country to go to that?
Yes.
How long have you lived there?
In Denmark 2 years, but before I was in the US for 2 years, then I was in Germany for 4 years, in England for a year and a half, but 25 years of my life I've been here in Kenya, and I come back every year. Yeah, so
very good.
I love my motherland, let me say that.
Very good.
I love it.
You'll tell us about your research journey, but first let me welcome you with the day's proverb.
Yes.
This week's proverbs are from Eritrea. You know the president of Eritrea?
Yeah, Isaias Afwerki.
Isaias Afwerki.
Okay.
Afwerki was denied a Nobel. I keep saying that. He was denied a Nobel Peace Prize when Abiy Ahmed of Ethiopia was given.
Yeah.
And Abiy Ahmed of Ethiopia was given because of brokering peace with Eritrea.
Yeah.
But the person on the other end was not
it.
okay.
Yeah.
That's not the point. The proverb.
Yes.
An old man who carries a load on his head and another in his arm played a lot when he was young.
An old man who carried a load on his head.
Who's carrying a load on his head and another one is in his arms must have really played when he was young.
Oh, it's a very clever proverb because my take is probably when he was young, he didn't work hard enough. So now all the life's troubles are following him. So he has to live through it. Maybe he has kids that he has to take to school, grandkids, maybe he's having some sort of old age diseases. He has to take care of that. And because he was not working when he was young, he was playing. Now all these troubles are following him. That's how I would interpret it.
I agree.
You agree?
You cannot refuse the opinion of a molecular scientist. It's not possible.
You can't argue.
No.
You can't argue.
I went to school for 17 years.
Yeah. Victor is here, so we talk about why molecular cancer research is important towards tackling the cancer burden in Kenya.
Yes.
You see?
Okay. Let's start with the things that you do.
Okay.
In Denmark, you are a lead research fellow at the Biotech Research and Innovation Center.
Yes.
What is the Biotech Research and Innovation Center?
So this is an academic center that brings a lot of researchers together who work on different topics on cancer, because every day we realize that cancer is not a single disease. It's a complex disease, and it has got many phases. So you can't understand this disease if only one person is working on it. So you have many cancers which affects almost every organ of the body. So all these researchers come together. They share resources. This would be like, machinery, core facility expertise, but then they try to study different aspects of particular cancers. For instance, you have in my lab group or in my research group, we look at something called metastasis. So metastasis is when cancer spreads to a different organ from the primary organ. And if you're a breast cancer patient, for instance, you can have metastasis to the brain, to the bones, to the liver, to the lungs. So metastasis that goes to the bones or to the lungs, they're totally different. you can't treat them in the same way. So the reason why we do this is we try to understand the molecular mechanisms behind these different spreads, and how can we then maybe make drugs that can specifically treat metastasis to the lungs, which is different from the one to the liver or to the bones or to the brain. So that's in a nutshell what we do.
That's what you do.
Yes.
In
But
Denmark.
specifically myself, I'm more interested in the vascular system, because cancer requires the blood system to travel to these distant sites. So I'm trying to understand, how do these cells communicate to the blood system, and how does the blood system communicate back to the cancer cells, telling it that you have arrived at your destination, because they just don't leave the breast and just travel anyhow to the bone. Something is directing them, and there are signaling molecules within the blood system that actually do this. So that's what I'm actually doing.
What have you found so far? What is it that directs them to the area where they end up?
There are a lot. There are a lot of things, and because we use cell line models. So if you use one cell line, you're going to find one particular molecule. But because patients are different, so we try to use a simple cell model to understand this. Then we then go into patient samples, and then we try to extrapolate whether the same molecule that we saw in our cell systems, we can then find them either in the blood, urine, or spinal fluid of patients. So right now, my preliminary results, I've found something called growth factors. So these are factors that they help with the survival of the cancer cells as they travel. And so what I need to now find out is whether these cancer cells actually express receptors for these growth factors that I found. Because if they don't express the receptors for these growth factors, then it's not what I'm looking for. So this is now the molecular aspect of it. Because if you are to make a drug to target this growth factor or the receptor, you actually need to understand whether they actually interact, form this lock and key that then tells the cancer cell you've arrived in the lung, or you've arrived in the brain, or you've arrived in the bone. And then you can now start colonizing this new environment, which then forms a metastasis.
Where does it begin? Where does this cancer cell begin its journey from?
The current dogma is that it's mutations. Yeah. So when you have a lot of mutations, when the cells are dividing, of course, it's like a tear and wear process, because the DNA is unwinding and then closing during the cell division process. So during this process of unwinding and closing, sometimes there's a mistake. And if these mistakes accumulate, then they form a mutation. And if the mutation hits a target that is responsible for checking the integrity of the cell, then it means that the cells can just grow and the integrity is not checked. So then they become cancerous. Okay. Yes.
So because there's no, if we can just, because I mean it can, we're getting down to the nitty gritty, isn't it? Yes. That's what molecules are. Yes. I'm just remembering from biology days, you're looking at the minute thing.
Yeah.
And if you can look at what then is domiciled there, then it can give rise to, bigger answers.
Yes.
But what's the end goal here with this molecular research? For treatment or for cure from where you are? Because you've mentioned, okay, so there are growth factors here. Can we then start to look at the science behind creating a drug that will treat this particular kind of cancer? Yeah. You talked about having an interest in the vascular
system. Yeah.
In the vascular system. So are we looking towards cure or are we looking towards treatment? And does that treatment then get applied across stages of cancer, 2, 3, 4?
Yes. So ideally, we want to find a cure. And from my perspective, I always say the cure for cancer is surgery. If we can remove the cancer fully from the organ it's attacking, and then there are no margins left, then we can tell the patient, we think you're cured. But cancer is a complex story. I've been in the field now for 12 years. Right from my master's degree now to where I'm doing my research fellowship, it's been 12 years of a journey. I think it's a very, very, very complex thing, because the more we learn about it, the more we find out that there's something behind something. There's a story behind a story. But back to your point, yes, the goal of molecular cancer research is to develop therapies, because that's what we can do.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you look at all the therapies that we use on our patients right now, somebody somewhere is sitting in a lab working on it, trying to understand the disease at a molecular level, then designing a target, either a chemical inhibitor or an antibody or something we call an antibody drug conjugate that can stop that cancer. And I don't think we are doing that enough in this country. Yes.
Why? What's hindering us?
We are not investing enough in cancer research. Do you know that since 1963, the first time we had a research call for cancer in this country was during the COVID era, and the government only set 50 million shillings aside for it. I know this because I'm one of the people who applied for it. I was still based at Yale University then, and of course, government bureaucracy, things take long. So all these projects were then combined into bigger projects, and some funding was issued. But that's it, 50 million shillings. That's like nothing. You can't solve this menace with 50 million shillings.
So, okay.
Yeah.
And yet we have many cancer researchers who are Kenyan.
Yes.
Where are they operating from?
A lot of them are abroad. In different countries, I know, because even some of the people that we founded that organization with, the Cancer Research Foundation or the Integrated Cancer Research Foundation, they're Kenyans. The CEO of this organization is called Dr. Hudson Alakonya. He's now based at Cold Springs Harbor in New York. He's trying to image pancreatic cancer, because pancreatic cancer is one of these cancers that hides, and only through imaging can you find where it is. That's what he's trying to do. We have one called Dr. Fiona Okonjo, who is in England. He's working for a company there. We have a Kenyan called Dr. Francis Makoa, who is really trying to push the limits. He's doing a lot of genomics work, but there's no funding. There is no money. And you cannot win this war without investment in research.
There's no money where? Because there's money where the researchers are currently.
Yes.
So let's look at it from a burden perspective.
Yes.
Where the cancer burden in Kenya today is quite something. I mean, the numbers that we're looking at in 2023 are incomparable to what was happening 10 to 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So 2020, 2019 is when we started to see a lot more cancer cases result in death. And maybe that's where the call came for something to be done. There's a lot of theory around that. So for a place where the burden has multiplied in the manner in which it has, one would think that the next thing would be, well, come on guys, we need to put some money and might behind this thing to find out exactly what is happening. In the world of science, what comes first? Do you wait for the burden to be so much so that you say, oh, okay, we need to throw something behind it? Or do you say, actually, you know what? It's important for us to do this research anyway, and let's find out exactly what is going on.
I think it can cut both ways. For example, in Denmark, where I am, this last year, which was 2022, I think they gave about $1 billion in research funding. This is to different areas. I think life sciences gets about 50% of that, and half of that then goes to something called basic research, because it's basic research where innovations come from. It's basic research that helps you understand things, and then there's applied research where we've developed a drug, but now we want to take it into the clinic. So now you start studying this drug in patients, in animals, and then maybe you want to do a regulatory approval, and so on and so forth. But basic research is really the fundamental that drives these countries, because when they understand the disease at that level, then they are able to identify there is this target, there is this target, there is this target, and then the government comes in and says, okay, we know that this research group has identified this target, this research group has identified this target. Can we then give money as grants so that this can be developed into a drug or an antibody? And then once this passes successfully in clinical trials, then the whole world is their market.
So there needs to be a constant...
Exactly.
There has to be constant research, constant search for knowledge.
Yes.
You don't want to wait until something has progressed
Yes.
to a certain point before you now start saying,
Yes.
put the money behind it. Okay.
And if I just go back a little bit, I think last week Citizen TV was talking about the big conversations about cancer, and I listened to it. It was around 3 hours. I listened to it fully, and of course, a diagnosis, therapy, advocacy, all these things are important.
Yeah.
But you barely hear research. We don't talk about it. And we need to start telling patients that the reason why your medicine is expensive, the reason why your diagnosis is expensive, is because all the antibodies we are using for immunohistochemistry, for instance, all the drugs we are using to treat you, they are imported. Sometimes they have to come in cold temperatures. That's cost of freight. Yeah. If it's stuck somewhere, somebody has to pay for that cost. And who is going to pay for it? It's the patient here. So if we start developing our molecular research here, then some of these things we can make them here, because Kenya has got enough talent to do these things here. I would say I'm a living example, but I also know so many people across the world who are Kenyans, who are working in different labs across the world trying to do research on cancer. If only they could get funding from the government, because the government has to put funding first before the private sector comes in.
Is that what happens globally?
Yes.
Is research government funded?
Yes.
In Denmark, where you work,
Yeah.
how much of government funding goes into research?
So last year, the government of Denmark set aside $1 billion to fund research initiatives in the country. Once they put this money, then other philanthropists, the big pharmaceuticals in that country, like Novo Nordisk and Novozymes, Leo Pharmaceuticals, Lundbeck Foundation, they then follow that up, because the government is putting...
The government is signaling
Yes.
that
Yeah,
this is the way to go.
Because remember, a private company doesn't want to pay for overheads. So the government will pay for that. A private company wants to buy you research consumables because they want output. Yeah. So if the government pays salaries, and sets up the labs, then it's easier to walk into a foundation and tell them, look, we have a functioning lab. What we are missing is some money to buy some reagents and do ABCD. Yeah.
So $1 billion from Denmark into research. What's the total budget of Denmark in dollars?
I don't have that in mind, but it's huge. It's huge. And again, this year in their finance bill, they're proposing to increase that to around $2 billion in research.
Just going into research?
Yes.
In all forms of research?
All forms of research, not just biological or biomedical research, all forms of research. And to just tell you how they are earning from this. So in 2006, in terms of life science industry exports, Denmark earned 58 billion DKK. So if you multiply that by 20, that's around 1 trillion Kenya shillings. Yeah. In 2018, it was 115 billion DKK.
Their earnings.
That's their earning from product exports, from the life
pharmaceutical product export.
Exactly. Yeah.
And this is now basically what you're saying is that research of $1 billion is earning them a lot more.
It's earning them a lot more
in terms of how much then they're able to produce in the country and then to export.
Yes. In 2020, it earned them 151 billion DKK. That's essentially what we collect all here in taxes. They earned just from the pharmaceutical industry. And it's because there's a massive pipeline of startups that start from university labs doing molecular research on different diseases, cancer, diabetes. I know you guys follow world news. You heard of this weight loss drug that came from Novo Nordisk.
Yes.
How much money do you think they're going to earn from that? It's going to be trillions of dollars.
Oh yeah, $80 a pop, that's for sure. Yeah.
So somebody somewhere sat down, spent 10 years of their life doing that, and now they'll just be resting at home, earning money from that, from all over the world. And Kenya being a leader in East Africa, if we take these things seriously, there's just a market around us. There's a big market around us because our genetics is so similar. So whatever will treat Kenyan patients will most likely treat Ugandan patients, Tanzanian patients, South Sudan, DRC, Rwanda. Somalia, etc.
Victor Oginga Oria is a lead research fellow at the Biotech Research and Innovation Center in Copenhagen, and he's a chief scientist at the Integrated Cancer Research Foundation of Kenya. Now, tell us about this foundation.
Okay, so this foundation started in 2018. It was an idea born by Dr. Hudson Alakonyo, who is our CEO, and it's because he saw the burden in the country, but he saw nothing concrete going towards addressing this problem. All other things were reactionary. Let's do diagnosis, let's do treatment. But I always say, you cannot treat what you don't know. You have to understand what you are treating for it to be effective. So Hudson, back then he was at Oxford University. So that's where he met certain friends. Some were Kenyan, so some are from Europe. And they came up with this idea. And we met on LinkedIn, because Kenyans who've done cancer biology as a postgraduate study are very few. So he reached out to me, and he just, we just clicked, because I also had the same idea, that it's important that we have a conversation about cancer research in Kenya. And so our ideas merged, and this is how Cancer Research Kenya was born. So we were fully registered in 2021 by the government of Kenya. So we are a non-profit by guarantee research organization. And actually this week we have a symposium at Kenyatta University on molecular cancer research. And it's going to start tomorrow until Friday. And we have exciting talks and speakers. It's the first event we are having on site. But we've also done a number of events. We've done awareness sessions, but in a different way, based on science. Yeah, because sometimes you come across documents or publications. Someone says, if you eat hot ugali, you get breast cancer.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see any correlation between cancer and eating hot ugali. Yeah. So I think it's important that even as we tackle this menace, it's important for people to also get the right information.
Address the myths.
Exactly. Yeah.
This is major. Because I believe at some point we had a conversation about, health interventions that take place because of myths. And this particular story that we're talking about, the link, especially in a certain region of Kenya, we're talking about the link between drinking hot beverages and esophageal cancer. And it came from a medical practitioner. Right? And even as now we are talking about molecular science and how it can then have a link towards treatment, because of the way in which health affects people, the person who sits on the other side of the desk or the other side of the glass and is a health practitioner is going to be believed.
Yes.
It's your pastor, it's your doctor, it's your teacher. Those are the three people that you take, leading from. So when you say this and we talk about things now that people have started to do as a result of that information, then are we not looking at a situation that is then damaging when it comes to, things that people have done over time? So maybe somebody does have esophageal cancer and other people stop drinking hot beverages, and there could be something else that is the link towards this disease.
Exactly. There is an underlying genetic mechanism behind every cancer. There is an underlying genetic mechanism. I can assure you of that. And until and unless we find it, we can never treat it. If you look even at Meru County, there was a publication that came out, I think, maybe in 2018, and they were looking at the burden of cancer in Meru County, and they found out that stomach cancer had the highest burden, comparable to countries like Japan, which also have the highest burden. And they say that because of chewing miraa could have caused this. But then I tell myself, there are people who chew miraa and don't get this cancer. There are people who don't chew miraa and get it. So it can't be miraa. This is just a coincidence. And I would say that there's a genetic effect. Maybe the Meru people have a mutation in a specific gene. There's a certain type of stomach cancer that is genetic. And so there's a mutation in a certain gene that they probably have. But because we've never screened them at that molecular level, we can never know the truth. And that's why we need to invest in these things. Then we can say people in Meru County have stomach cancer because of this particular mutation, or of this particular receptor, or of this particular enzyme. and so on and so forth.
So just for purposes of clarity,
Yes.
Doc, we are saying that there is a direct link between molecular science, what you're able to find on that very small detail, and treatment for cancer. We are saying that we can make a link.
Yes.
If we look at the science properly, not we, you,
Yes.
and others in the field,
Yes.
look at this science properly and make the linkages, then we can actually have treatment that is going to start to, obviously, work.
Yes.
Is that what we are saying?
Yes.
Unequivocally having been proved, or it's still in the process of being researched?
It has been proved. And let me give you examples. For instance, if you know of women, or if you've heard of women with breast cancer, you hear of HER2 positive breast cancer.
Yeah.
So HER2 is a receptor, and it is overexpressed on the surface of breast cancer. And so when you have more HER2 on the surface, it tells the cell, keep growing, keep dividing, keep growing, keep dividing, because there's a lot of it on the surface. So we developed an antibody that blocks that receptor and then tells the cells to stop growing. And that's what we use, the HER2 antibody. Is it called Herceptin? That's what it is. Somebody sat down and figured out that there's a particular type of breast cancer that overexpresses this, and then developed an antibody towards that. There are cancers that really rely heavily on blood vessel networks. And there's a growth factor called vascular endothelial growth factor. This is what communicates to the blood vessels and tells them to divide and spread. And cancers love when there's blood vessels around them, because then they get food, they get oxygen, and they're able to get the waste also outside of the cells. So a monoclonal antibody, or an antibody that blocks this receptor, was developed. So it means there's no communication between the ligand and the receptor, so the blood vessel cannot spread throughout the tumor. So the tumor is starved of food and oxygen.
Grow.
Yeah.
It shrinks. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
okay.
and this is very targeted. Yeah. It's
Sure.
very, very targeted. So you can only use it in a particular cancer after you've known that this is how it behaves. Yeah.
Usually we adopt things, we adopt best
Yes.
practice
Yeah.
that has started, somewhere else, or somebody must have said, okay, this is good, it works. Can we now invite it? And then again, the scientists, the researchers look into it and they say, okay, let's see if we can bring it here. Let's look at the big 5 cancers in Kenya. Breast cancer, cervical cancer, prostate cancer. We look at leukemia,
Yes.
bone marrow. There's one other I cannot remember.
I think it's esophageal cancer.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, can we then say, if we're looking at adopting best practice, that this science or this research, can you pinpoint, or can we say that already this molecular science is looking at the growth factor in these big 5 that are in Kenya today, that make up 90% of the cancer burden for this country?
Yes. Yes, we can do that. But first, we must generate what we call cell models. So we need to work collaboratively, researchers with surgeons, with molecular oncologists, and so on, so that when they get that biopsy from the patient, if it's big enough, some of it goes to pathology, some of it goes to the lab, where I and other people can then make cell lines out of this, because a lot of times, drug development, we use cell lines from Caucasian patients that doesn't match ours. So the first big thing, and something that I would really want to see maybe our government through the NCI investing in, is we need to have a broad panel of different cell lines from across this country for all different types of tumors. Because then when they're doing clinical trials and drug testing, we can also say, okay, you want to sell that drug in Kenya here. Let's see if it can work in our patients. So if it's not working in our patients, then we have to see how it can be redesigned so that it can work. Or we can simply say, okay, it's not working for our patients. So now let's find out why our patients are different. And then can we develop our own here locally? It will be cheap in the long run for the patients. And this is something that I say it's investment for public good. Yeah. We don't do this for profit or anything. It's a tireless work.
Yeah.
And you're doing it for public good. Yeah.
So let me get it right, Victor. You're advocating molecular cancer research.
Yes.
as a level of research in the country? Not that there is no cancer research happening in the country.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying molecular cancer research. There's very little, if any, happening in the country.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the research that's happening in the country at Kemri, Kenyatta University Teaching Research Referral Hospital also is doing a lot of research on cancer and working with various satellite hospitals and facilities.
Yeah.
What do we lack when they don't go molecular?
So, for instance, you will go to Bomet County, and then you say, we found 1,000 people with esophageal cancer. 10 of them were stage 4, 100 of them were stage 1. This number were women, this number were men. And then we looked at their lifestyle. Some of them were drinking hot tea. Some of them were probably drinking mursik and so on. And that's okay.
Yeah.
That kind of information is okay, because you also need to have or to understand the patient lifestyle so that you can also understand the disease better. But it's not enough, because how are you going to help them once you know that you have this number of stage 4, this number of stage 3? Even if you're not going to help these people, there are patients in the pipeline coming, because remember, our quality of life is improving, so lifestyle factors are also coming in. So there are more patients coming in the pipeline.
Yep.
And we have some right now who we are telling, we can't help you. Yeah? We can't help you because there is not enough molecular work happening. So the other thing that I can mention, in our lab actually, the other thing that we do is we deal directly with what we call organoids. So organoids are cells, fresh cells from a patient who has just undergone surgery. We pick them and we grow them in certain conditions, and then we do different drug tests on them. And the reason we do this is because some of these patients go to the hospital, and because of their molecular profile, the doctors tell them there's no drug that can help you.
Yeah.
So they give us those biopsies, and this work is done by a colleague of mine in the lab. I don't do that personally, but that's what she does. She tests different drugs that are already commercially available but are not approved for that indication to see if it can help that patient. Because for that patient, she doesn't care that, this drug is not approved for me. So if she sees that the cells can shrink in the lab with these different treatments, she then reports back to the doctor that, look, we tried these drugs in culture in the lab and they helped, they killed the cells. So maybe you can try them on this patient. And I can tell you they've helped 3 patients. They have helped 3 patients, and that's a lot, because you cannot quantify life. That's time with family, with children, with grandchildren, with friends. Yeah.
A big shout out to Patrick Ocheng, who's watching us from the US. He says he's also working on molecular breast cancer research in the US. Does the Integrated Cancer Research Foundation of Kenya work with these other facilities? Does it work with Kemri? Does it work with KUT or ROH? So are you collaborating with other researchers?
Yeah. So we are still very young. We don't even have a physical place yet. But that's the point. That's even why we are doing this symposium in collaboration with Kenyatta University. Because like I said at the beginning, this is not a one-man work. It's going to take a collaborative effort of research institutions, private, public. It's going to take academic institutions. It's going to take doctors in private hospitals, public hospitals, retired researchers who want to give back. It's a collaborative effort for the public good of managing this burden. Because otherwise we will get to a point where we cannot treat this disease because everything is imported and it's expensive. And we saw it during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I remember having a discussion with a friend of mine, and I was like, Kenya has some of the best virologists in Africa. All this, and I'll probably sound political now, all this money that we spend on ghost dams and, things that don't work. If you gave this money to some of these researchers and tell them develop a vaccine, they will. Because we also have a vaccine manufacturing unit at Kavi. So we could do all those things locally here. But instead we chose to wait and import. So I just think that our priorities sometimes are not right. And that's why we keep paying these steep prices for some of these things, which we can actually develop ourselves. Yeah.
Who needs to get this message, Victor?
This message, I think, needs to go to the Ministry of Health. It needs to go to the maybe the Department of Science, Technology and Research, and also to the President. I think since cancer has become such a big burden, one thing that can really help is creating a cancer research fund. We need it to be a standalone fund where probably can get money from the consolidated fund every year. Yeah, because I tell you, if you can get money into research, you will see all those talented Kenyans who are working for different organizations, different universities out there to come back here and do research that can actually help our people, our communities. Yeah. So creation of that fund, I think, would be the first step towards saying that every year, come what may, we know that 1 billion or 2 billion shillings is going to the Cancer Research Fund, and this is what it's funding. Yeah. Then it becomes very easy to say, I want to get this reagent, I want to get this consumable. Then you don't have to, you have researchers in this country who are using their own salaries to buy consumables. I mean, you can't do research like that. You can't be competitive like that. Yeah. If we are living in a globalized world and we are always complaining that we are importing everything, this is an industry that, if well funded, in 10, 15 years could have massive ramifications for our economy. It could produce up to probably even 10% of our GDP if we actually and are deliberately investing in it. And that's a surety that I think I have, because I've seen it happen in other countries. Yeah.
So, I mean, we talk about the clamor for research by countries to be made priority and looking at certain percentage of budgets to go towards this, and it's almost becomes cliche in nature when we talk about the Abuja Declaration and how everybody promised to do whatever. It hasn't really happened. And so we're going back to that chicken egg situation. Now, what is it going to take? I mean, looking at the numbers of the burden across the continent, that what is it going to take? Because, like you said, cancer is complex. There are very many people who are working on it, looking at research under the microscope, trying to find out what's going on. It's complex in nature, so obviously more hands on deck is better. But what is it going to take for these spaces, and these spaces being countries, Kenya, South Africa, Nigeria, wherever, to say, we need to be serious about things, because our populations are dying a very cruel death at the hands of cancer. What would it take? And not even as gory as death, but what awakening needs to click for this to happen? Because it is clear that you can find interventions for treatment if you do the research. It's like 1 is equal, 1 + 1 is 2. You can find them if you do the research.
So I think it has to be a deliberate prioritization of this. Just like when HIV hit home, we said we are going to put money, and the likes of NASCOP and the National AIDS Control Council, I think, came in, and a lot of money
yes,
and a lot of money went into KEMRI to try and try to understand the disease, and also a lot of donor funding came in. But cancer is a very silent disease. You don't really see a lot of it, but it's there. You go into hospitals, you see gory faces along the walls. Most of those are cancer patients. So I think I don't want us to form a commission to investigate this, because to me that's a waste of time. If you want to fund cancer research, just fund it. Just say this is a burden, and we are always copying best practices. This time around we are in Singapore and South Korea. We are copying them. You're saying they are doing this better. So we should also copy that. We are doing roads or affordable housing or dams because other countries are doing it the same. So these countries are also funding research. So just fund research. Just say, every year I'm going to put 30 billion Kenya shillings for research. 5 goes to TB and HIV, another 5 goes to malaria, another 5 goes to cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, and those two are 2 other silent diseases that are killing Kenyans. But because there is no underlying molecular research to support this, we are simply trying to treat them without necessarily, because what happens if, say for example, you go to hospital, you're sick, and the doctor tells you, we've tried all kinds of medicine, there's nothing else
seems to be
we
working.
Can't do anything else for you.
Of course the patient can accept it, but how do you feel as a doctor if next time a similar patient comes in and you tell them, we can't help you.
Same
And then,
thing.
and then. So that's where we come in. Such patients, we have to get their samples, go back to the lab and understand, why was this patient non-responsive to all these drugs? So you try to find a different profile. So next time you have a patient with the same profile coming in, you've already identified what was the problems. You go straight to that. You don't start from zero again. Let's start with drug A, B, C, D, and then, we can't help you. But, no, he has this profile, so we should start with this. Maybe that will help them. That's why this work is important.
Right.
Yeah.
There are many actors, of course, in this. There's the science part of it, and then there's policy, there is government, there is, those who are independent, and then there are those who are looking for the answers in terms of those then who are sick. Is there a way that it can then be beyond? Is a constant call? Look, we give an example of HIV. Everybody got into the conversation.
Yeah.
Survivors, medical practitioners, non-governmental organizations, nations, everybody got involved in the conversation. Is it not at this point with cancer, with the interventions that are being sought, that everybody then get involved in the conversation? It can't just be the researchers with the begging bowl to government and say, please fund this thing so that we can find an answer. Must it not be collective?
It actually should be collective, because if you look at countries abroad, of course, Denmark, UK, Germany, governments put some money in research, but also people. Like you guys were announcing or advertising some weeks ago about the Standard Chartered Heart Run or something?
Yeah, the Nairobi Marathon. Yeah.
We could have the Nairobi Marathon, but for cancer research, where people pay in, but this money, we know, it's going to a cancer center. It's going to do research A, B, C, and D. There is a company in Denmark actually called... it's a clothing company, and I don't know the background very well, but all their profits every year, all their profits go to, it's called NEYE, N-E-Y-E. All their profits every year go to cancer research in Denmark. Yeah, all their profits go to cancer, and once they start doing that, there are other small companies that see and they're like, I want to be involved with this. I want to be involved with this. So if the government puts money in research, it's very easy for scientists to walk into Equity Foundation Group, KCB Foundation Group, Manu Chandaria Foundation Group, and tell them, you guys do a lot of CSR. Yeah, I know you do boreholes, you do schools, you do markets, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But maybe it's also time that some of that money goes towards addressing a more serious problem, which is cancer research. Yeah.
What drove you into cancer research?
Curiosity. And I think it's a personal story that... so my dad died when I was 6. This was 1994. And he died from bone cancer. But because back then, HIV was really rampant. Yeah. So if you died of cancer, it was like, it just passed. But my grandmother, being a conservative, she believed that somebody did something to her son, and she still believes that to date, So,
and she has identified the culprit.
She has identified the culprit, of course. And so, because I was raised by my grandma, and it's actually one of the reasons why I come back every year, because I have to see her. When I got of age and I was able to understand a death certificate, I saw my dad's death certificate, and it said sarcoma. So he had died of bone cancer. And the reason why my grandma thought somebody had done something to him is because his legs were turning green. And the legs were turning green because the bone was already eaten. Yeah, so there was so much inflammation, and then it was just reactive. And because they'd never seen anything like that, so they said, somebody did something. Yeah. So then when I got to university, I studied biochemistry at Kenyatta University, and then when it came to do my postgraduate studies, a lot of Kenyans were still going into virology. In fact, I did my internship at Kemri in a virology lab. But then I was like, there's too many of us here. Yeah. So I decided to just take another path. So I went into cancer biology. And the rest, as we say, is just history.
You've been on it.
I've been on it. Yeah.
For now, how many years?
Since my master's studies up to date is 12 years. Yeah.
Keep at it, brother.
Yeah, absolutely.
Keep at it. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you also for hosting me.
Victor Oginga Oria, Lead Research Fellow at Biotech Research and Innovation Center, Copenhagen, Sweden, has been our guest. Thank you very much for joining us. Salimia watu Sweden ukirudi. Keep it here for more conversations.
This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day.